And you mentioned the politics of horse racing, whether it's in Florida or what's going on in California or New York, et cetera. And Joe and I like to think that we're quote unquote experts in horse racing, but I'll be quick to say that I'm a novice when it comes to, or neophyte when it comes to politics in general. So but I'm watching you because you're able to break it down and delineate it. So a knucklehead like me can understand what's going on in politics. How do you bridge that gap to be able to talk to a general audience where there's people that really want the granular information about what's going on to the novices like myself when you're explaining about a race in Nebraska, for example?
Yeah, I'm not always. I think I'm guilty a lot of times of going of probably swinging and missing when it comes to that. But that's the challenge. That's the object. And that's the name of the game. And the thing I'm always trying to think of now is the things I'm mindful of are not too many numbers at once. Try to find a number, a number and a number to compare that number to.
Right.
And just make the point around that. So what I've kind of settled on, like on election nights, that I think has worked pretty well is just, all right, we're going through the map. We're going through, these states, these counties within states. There's 3,143 counties in the country. It's dizzying to people. We're not going to get through them all, obviously, on election night, but they're all going to be important in some way if I show them on the air. So how do you make this thing instantly meaningful to somebody? To me, it's just as simple as I just want to show people, okay, we're in, Smith County. What was the result in the last election, 2020?
Right.
And what are we looking at tonight? And show people as we reveal one county after the other, is there a pattern? And that's what we were, in 2024, last November. I mean, that was, if folks were watching, I think it became pretty clear pretty early that the pattern was like 95% of these counties, Trump was improving by, 3, 4, 5, sometimes 10 plus points. And in very, very few was Harris improving. So, we didn't call the election until I forgot what time it even was. Those nights are a blur to me, but for hours, I feel it was me up there saying, and look over here, 4 years ago, Biden won this by 2. Tonight, Trump's won it by 5. And it's a county nobody knows anything about except people who live there. But so that's what I try to do.
Got it.
Yeah. Well, and I have a somewhat of a follow up on that. I think what you've carved out this niche that it's really important because I think so much of cable news has become opinion journalism. And whether it's one side or the other, that people, I think, are crying out for like an authority, for like a trusted, dispassionate source. And I think that's you on election night for people, where people can like cut through all the other bullshit and say, well, here's what Kornacki says the numbers are. Has that always been your lane? Have you ever had any difficulty leaving like your personal political opinions out of your coverage? Or has that always kind of been what you've done and what you've wanted to do?
No, I've always been like this. It's the funny thing. It's like I think when you talk to sort of like the sort of intellectual critics of journalism and media and all that stuff, they always use the term horse race journalism as like a pejorative. And no, I'm like,
I can do both.
Yeah, sign me up. Because I've always felt, it's what got me interested in the first place. I was interested in elections specifically, and just trying to understand why one candidate was winning, why one candidate was losing, what the vote patterns were, all these things. That's what always, kind of interested me. That's what kind of brought me in from a young age. It brought me in really at the same time that I was like, when I think back on it, I'm a kid. I'm old. So I remember we got the newspaper delivered, to our doorstep every morning. If I would go out, get it with the Boston Globe. Page 4 was baseball stats every day of the season, inhale those, get the NBA stats in the winter. Horse racing got in there. My uncle started taking me to the track. I loved reading those programs. And then at some point, there was, I think we had a class project or something on a governor's race. And, I got drawn into that. And then that kind of became part of it too. So no, I've always been interested in trying to understand that and kind of share that. So it really just grew out of that.
Right. John, go ahead. Ask your stupid question.
All right. So I prefaced the team by saying I'm going to ask a really stupid question, but hopefully Steve will be patient with me. Okay. So I'm watching you on election night, and you happened, I don't remember what state it was, but you were like, I'm going to use Nebraska as an example. You're like, okay, well, 2% of the vote is in this county in Nebraska, and we have a projected winner, and it's Trump. And I'm like, wait, there's 8 people who voted. How did he get? So explain to an idiot like me, how did you get such a small sample and know? And you were right, but I mean, how did you know at that point, 10 minutes after the polls opened, that area went red?
Lucky guess.
Come on.
No. What happens in those states, it depends. There are some states where they have the exit poll going on, and it's the exit poll is going to be so overwhelming they can pretty much do it on that. But generally in these states, if you're saying like a Nebraska or something where you going in 99.99% how it's going,
right? You
just want to make sure there's nothing surprising in any of the results. So what you have is you've identified ahead of time a bunch of precincts. So, the level below county and city, the most local, and you've identified a bunch of them that are sort of like, just these are, if something's happening, you're going to see it in these. And usually you'll get a few of those in. It matches up with what the 99.999% expectation is.
Right.
So you call the state.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So what you're saying is you look at the buyer numbers and you know that because okay. All right.
See, there's a lot of overlap here,
Well, that's that'll lead me to my last question. I'll just bounce back to racing for a second. You're going to do a lot of handicapping for the Derby. It's obviously the most over handicapped race in America, in the world. Do you take any kind of a different approach for the Derby because it is a 20 horse field? There are a lot of variables coming in, or do you kind of like when you open the form? What's your first instinct? What's the first thing you look for? And then does it change at all for a race like the Derby?
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering if I'm going to kind of stick with it this year, but I since the point system came in, it's about 10, 12 years ago, 2013, I guess, the trend had seemed to really be to favor the front runners. And the speed was holding up much better. And there's all sorts of theories about that, fewer sprinters in the race, things like this. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, I've definitely been looking for a horse that I think is going to be forward, just a couple lengths off the lead, maybe, most recent Derbies obviously have thrown a little bit of that, I was downgrading like, a horse like Sierra Leone, I was downgrading,
okay.
In the past. I'm not sure what I'm going to do this year, but that's been my approach.
Okay. Gotcha.
And then, Steve, my last question is actually one from an audience member, which is what statistics will you be sharing with the audience that mean the most to you? Is it post position? Is it jockey trainer connection? Is it a key race that somebody won? What's the most important stat that you feel like when you're handicapping the Derby?
Yeah, well, it's funny. We had one last year. I mean, this is the most basic one. We had a thing last year built around the buyers, and, Mystic Dan had that 101. I think it was Fierceness had the highest buyer coming in,
right.
With the 110.
Yep.
And Mystic Dan, I think, had the second highest at 101. And we did a thing, and it was one of those, we didn't realize it till after the show. We were like, this was the whole story. It was like, here's the buyers. Fierceness is either going to win this race or finish up the track.
Right.
And if you get beyond Fierceness, by the way, here's this horse at like 18-1 that's how I wish I sold it on the air. Instead, I was like, well, you see Mystics. But we put the list up. We had done it. We said no horse. I think the number had been, I think you took Rich Strike out of it or something. Yeah. Don't quote me on this, but it's something like no horse with lower than a 94 buyer had won this thing in X. I mean, there was a pretty clear cutoff line. And when they get into triple digits, it gets even more dramatic. And there was Mystic Dan just sitting there. And I kind of discounted, I guess, as a wet track thing or something. Mm-hmm. But, we're definitely doing something, obviously we'll be a year too late, but we'll be doing that hit again.
Got it.
Great.
Well, can't wait to watch. Can't wait to see all the coverage. You guys do an unbelievable job. Congratulations again on the new contract. And thanks for joining us, Steve. This has been so much fun.
No, thanks, guys. Sorry again to keep you waiting, but it was a blast.
Anytime. We'll see you at the Derby.
All right. Sounds good.